The cold bit through Zelda Jackson's threadbare dress like 1,000 tiny knives as she lay crumpled in the snow, blood seeping from the gash on her temple where her father's fist had connected with the side of her head before he rode away without looking back. The winter of 1881 had come early to the mountains outside Tucumcari, New Mexico, and the February wind howled through the pines like a wounded animal, but all she could hear was the echo of his words. "You are nothing to me anymore, girl, and you never were." She had tried to stand, tried to call out, but her vision swam and her legs buckled beneath her. The world tilted sideways and she collapsed into the snow that had begun falling that morning, watching through dimming eyes as her father's horse disappeared into the white curtain of the blizzard. 20 years old, and left to die like a dog on the side of a mountain trail because she had refused to marry the man he had chosen for her, a wealthy rancher twice her age who smelled of whiskey and cruelty. Her father had struck her so hard she had fallen from her horse, and when she looked up from the ground, begging him not to leave her, he had simply turned his back and ridden away as if she were already dead. The snow fell heavier now, covering her dark hair with white, and Zelda felt herself slipping away into a darkness that seemed almost welcoming compared to the bitter cold. Her last conscious thought was that at least she would die free rather than living as a prisoner in a loveless marriage. Damon Larson had been tracking the elk herd for 3 days, but the sudden blizzard had forced him to abandon the hunt and head back toward his small ranch 10 miles south. The 24-year-old cowboy had built a modest life for himself in the 2 years since he had come west from Missouri, working hard and saving every penny to buy his land and a small herd of cattle. He rode with his hat pulled low against the driving snow, his horse picking its way carefully along the treacherous mountain trail, when something dark against the white caught his eye. At first he thought it was a fallen log or perhaps a deer that had succumbed to the cold, but as he drew closer his heart seized in his chest. A woman lay motionless in the snow, her dress soaked through and her lips already turning blue. He was off his horse before he could think, dropping to his knees beside her and pressing his fingers to her throat, praying for a pulse. It was there, faint and thready, but there. "Madam, can you hear me?" he called, but she did not respond. Blood had frozen in her dark hair, and when he gently probed the wound, he found a nasty gash that could only have come from a deliberate blow. Rage flared in his chest at the thought of someone leaving this woman to die, but he pushed it aside. There would be time for anger later. Right now she needed warmth and shelter, or she would not survive the night. His ranch was too far, and he knew she would not last the journey in this weather. He scanned the mountainside and remembered the old line shack about half a mile west, a shelter used by cowboys during the summer months when they moved cattle through the high country. It was not much, but it had 4 walls and a roof, and most importantly a stone fireplace. It would have to be enough. Damon gathered the woman carefully into his arms, surprised by how light she felt, and lifted her onto his horse before swinging up behind her. He cradled her against his chest, sharing what warmth he could, and turned his mount toward the line shack. The ride took nearly 20 minutes in the heavy snow, and by the time he reached the small cabin his hands were numb and the woman had not stirred once. The door hung crooked on its hinges, but it opened, and Damon carried her inside the single room that smelled of dust and old smoke. Someone had left a stack of firewood beside the stone hearth, dried and ready, and he sent up a silent prayer of thanks. He laid the woman on the floor near the fireplace and worked quickly to build a fire, his cold fingers fumbling with the matches until finally a flame caught and began to spread through the kindling. Once the fire was burning steadily, he turned his attention back to the woman. Her dress was soaked through and would need to come off or she would never get warm. He hesitated, knowing it was improper, but propriety meant nothing if she died. He found an old wool blanket in a trunk against the wall, dusty but dry, and carefully removed her wet dress, averting his eyes as much as possible, before wrapping her in the blanket. He removed her wet boots and stockings and rubbed her icy feet between his hands, trying to restore circulation. For the next hour he worked to warm her, adding wood to the fire, rubbing her hands and feet, and talking to her constantly, though she showed no sign of hearing him. "You are going to be all right," he told her over and over, willing it to be true. "I am not going to let you die. You are safe now." As the cabin warmed and the fire blazed, color slowly began to return to her face. Damon heated snow in a tin cup he found on a shelf and tried to get her to drink, tilting small amounts of water between her lips. Some she swallowed reflexively, which he took as a good sign. He examined the wound on her head more carefully, cleaning it as best he could with water and a piece of torn fabric from his own shirt. The gash was deep, but the bleeding had stopped, and he thought she would recover if infection did not set in. Night fell, and the wind continued to howl outside, but inside the lined shack it grew almost warm. Damon sat beside the woman, keeping vigil, adding wood to the fire and checking her pulse every few minutes. He studied her face in the firelight, and thought she was beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with fine features or careful grooming. There was strength in the set of her jaw, determination in the line of her brow, and something else he could not quite name. He dozed fitfully in the night, jerking awake every time she stirred or made a sound. Toward dawn she began to move restlessly, her head turning from side to side, and soft moans escaped her lips. Damon knelt beside her and placed a cool hand on her forehead. "Easy now," he murmured. "You are safe. No one is going to hurt you." Her eyes fluttered open slowly, unfocused and confused, and she stared at him as if trying to make sense of where she was. They were the deepest brown he had ever seen, like rich earth after rain, and for a moment he forgot to breathe. "Where?" she whispered, her voice cracked and raw. "A lined shack in the mountains," Damon said gently. "I found you on the trail yesterday in the snow. You were hurt. Do you remember what happened?" Memory flooded back into those dark eyes, and with it came pain so profound that Damon felt it like a physical blow. Tears welled up and spilled down her cheeks, and her whole body began to shake. "My father," she choked out. "He left me. He hit me and left me to die." Damon felt that rage return, hot and fierce, but he kept his voice calm. "He is not here now. You are safe. I promise you, you are safe." She looked at him for a long moment, searching his face as if trying to decide whether to believe him, and then something inside her seemed to break. She turned her face away and wept silently, her shoulders shaking under the blanket. Damon did not try to stop her tears or offer empty comfort. He simply stayed beside her, a steady presence in the storm, and let her grieve for the father who had betrayed her. When her tears finally subsided, she turned back to him. "Thank you," she whispered. "You saved my life." "Anyone would have done the same," Damon said, though they both knew that was not true. "What is your name?" she asked. "Damon Larson. I have a ranch south of here, near Tucumcari." "Zelda Jackson," she said, "or I was. I suppose I am nothing now." "You are alive," Damon said firmly. "That makes you something." She managed a weak smile at that, and he felt something shift in his chest. He stood and moved to check the fire, suddenly needing distance from those dark eyes that seemed to see right through him. "Are you hungry?" he asked. "I have some jerky and hardtack in my saddlebag." "I do not know," Zelda said honestly. "I feel strange, hollow. You should try to eat something. You need your strength." He retrieved the food and brought it to her along with more water. She sat up slowly, wincing, and he saw her become aware of her state of undress. Her cheeks flushed and she pulled the blanket tighter around herself. "Your dress was soaked," Damon explained, looking away. "I hung it by the fire to dry. I apologize for the impropriety, but you would have frozen otherwise." "You have nothing to apologize for," Zelda said quietly. "You saved my life. My modesty seems a small price to pay for that." They sat in awkward silence for a moment, and then Zelda asked, "How long was I unconscious?" "About 15 hours, give or take. It is morning now, though you cannot tell it with this storm." As if to punctuate his words, wind rattled the cabin door and whistled through cracks in the walls. "Were you here all night? Did you stay with me? Of course. I was not going to leave you alone." Something in her expression softened, and she looked at him with wonder, as if kindness was a language she had forgotten. "Why?" she asked simply. Damon considered the question. Why had he stayed? He could have gotten her warm, left supplies, and ridden for help. But the thought of leaving her alone, vulnerable and hurt, had never even crossed his mind. "Because it was the right thing to do," he said finally. "Because no one deserves to wake up alone after what you went through." Zelda bit into the jerky he had given her and chewed slowly, thinking. After a moment she said, "My father wanted me to marry Abel Wright. Do you know him?" Damon knew the name. Abel Wright owned one of the largest ranches in the territory and had a reputation for being hard and unforgiving. "I know of him. He is 45 years old and has buried 2 wives already. My father owed him money, gambling debts, and Wright agreed to forgive everything if I would marry him. When I refused, my father said I was an ungrateful daughter who deserved nothing. We were riding back from Tucumcari when I told him I would never change my mind. He became so angry. He hit me so hard I fell from my horse, and when I begged him not to leave me, he just rode away." Her voice broke on the last words. What kind of man leaves his own daughter to die? Damon said, his voice tight with anger. "The kind who cares more about his debts than his child," Zelda said bitterly. "I should have known. My mother died when I was 10, and he has resented me ever since as if it was my fault. I was never good enough, never useful enough. Just another mouth to feed and burden to carry." "That is not true," Damon said fiercely. "The failing is his, not yours. A father is supposed to protect his daughter, not sell her to the highest bidder." Zelda looked at him with those dark eyes full of pain and something else, something that might have been hope. "You do not even know me. Why do you care?" "Because I know what it is like to be alone," Damon said quietly. "My parents died of cholera when I was 17. I had a younger sister, Emma, who was only 12. We had no other family, and the town wanted to split us up, send her to an orphanage while I worked to pay off my father's debts. I could not let that happen. We ran, came out west with almost nothing. I worked every job I could find, slept in barns and under bridges, saved every penny. Emma was so brave, never complained even when we were hungry and cold." He paused, his throat tight. "She got sick 2 winters ago, pneumonia. I did everything I could, found a doctor, paid for medicine we could not afford, but it was not enough. She died in my arms, and I have been alone ever since." Tears filled Zelda's eyes again. "I am so sorry. I tell you this so you know that I understand what it is to lose family, to feel abandoned. But I also know that you are stronger than you think. You survived last night. You survived your father's cruelty. You will survive whatever comes next." They sat in silence for a while, watching the fire burn, 2 wounded souls finding unexpected comfort in each other's presence. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside the small cabin it felt almost peaceful. As the day wore on, Zelda's dress dried and she dressed again, grateful to be covered even though Damon had been nothing but respectful. The storm showed no signs of letting up, and they both knew they would be stuck in the cabin for at least another night. Damon went outside to tend to his horse, bringing the animal into the lean-to attached to the cabin where it would be sheltered from the worst of the weather. He returned with his bedroll and saddlebags, shaking snow from his coat. "It is bad out there," he said. "We will not be able to leave until this passes." "I am sorry to be such a burden," Zelda said. "You are not a burden," Damon replied. "Besides, I would not have left this storm anyway. At least this way I have company." They passed the afternoon talking, sharing stories of their lives. Zelda told him about growing up on her father's failing ranch, about dreams she had once had of teaching school or perhaps running a boarding house in town. Damon told her about learning to cowboy, about the satisfaction of working with his hands and building something from nothing. They laughed together over small things, and for a while Zelda forgot about the pain and betrayal. As evening fell and they shared another simple meal, Damon found himself studying Zelda's face in the firelight, noticing the way her eyes crinkled when she smiled, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was thinking. He had known her less than a day, and yet he felt drawn to her in a way he could not explain. She was brave and honest and strong, and he realized with a start that he did not want to say goodbye to her when the storm ended. That night they lay on opposite sides of the fire, wrapped in blankets, but sleep eluded Damon. He listened to Zelda's breathing and wondered what would happen to her when they returned to civilization. She had no home to return to, no family to take her in. The thought of her struggling alone filled him with a fierce protectiveness that surprised him with its intensity. "Damon," Zelda's voice came soft through the darkness. "Are you awake?" "Yes." "What will I do? Where will I go?" The fear in her voice was raw. He rolled onto his side to face her across the fire. "You will figure it out. You are strong, Zelda, stronger than you know." "I do not feel strong. I feel lost." He was quiet for a moment, and then he said something that surprised them both. "You could come to my ranch. I need help with the house and the cooking, and you would have a safe place to stay until you decide what you want to do." "I could not impose on you like that," Zelda said, though he heard the hope in her voice. "It is not an imposition. It is an offer freely given. Think about it." "You do not have to decide now." "Why are you being so kind to me?" she asked, echoing her earlier question. This time Damon had a different answer. "Because from the moment I saw you lying in that snow, something in me knew I was meant to find you. I know that sounds foolish, we have only just met, but I cannot shake the feeling that you were meant to come into my life." Zelda was quiet for so long he thought she had fallen asleep, but then she said softly, "I feel it too. Like maybe my father leaving me was terrible but also somehow necessary, because it brought me to you." They lay awake for a long time after that, not speaking but comforted by each other's presence. When Damon finally drifted off to sleep, it was with a smile on his face. The storm broke the next morning, leaving the world blanketed in pristine white. Damon and Zelda emerged from the cabin to find the sky clear and blue, the air crisp and cold. His horse had weathered the storm well, and after a simple breakfast they prepared to leave. "Are you strong enough to ride?" Damon asked, studying Zelda with concern. The wound on her head had scabbed over, but she still moved carefully. "I think so," she said. "And even if I am not, I would rather take my chances than stay here any longer. I want to move forward, not stay trapped in the place where I almost died." Damon understood that sentiment. They mounted his horse together, Zelda sitting in front of him, and he wrapped one arm around her waist to steady her. The contact sent a jolt through him, and he wondered if she felt it too. They rode slowly through the snow, heading south toward his ranch. The journey took most of the day, and by the time they arrived at the small homestead, Zelda was exhausted. The ranch was modest, A simple cabin with a barn and several corrals, but it was neat and well maintained. Smoke curled from the chimney, and Zelda looked at Damon in surprise. "I have a hand who helps me, Ben Torres," Damon explained. "He stays in the barn, but he will have kept the fire going while I was gone." Ben emerged from the barn as they rode up, a weathered Mexican man in his 50s with kind eyes and a ready smile. His expression turned to concern when he saw Zelda. "Boss, what happened? Who is this?" "Ben, this is Zelda Jackson. I found her in the mountains during the storm. She was hurt and left to die. She is going to be staying with us for a while." Ben's face darkened with anger, but he simply nodded. "Welcome, Miss Jackson. You are safe here." "Thank you," Zelda said quietly. Damon helped her down from the horse and led her into the cabin. It was small but comfortable, with a large stone fireplace, a wooden table and chairs, a cook stove, and a bed in one corner. Damon looked at the bed and then at Zelda. "You take the bed. I will sleep on the floor or in the barn." "I cannot take your bed," Zelda protested. "You can and you will," Damon said firmly. "You are still recovering and you need proper rest. No arguments." Zelda was too tired to fight. She sank onto the bed and within minutes was asleep. Damon stood watching her for a moment, marveling at how right it felt to have her in his home, and then he went outside to help Ben with the evening chores. "What is the real story, boss?" Ben asked as they fed the horses. Damon told him everything, and Ben listened with growing anger. "Her own father did that. Madre de Dios. What kind of man could be so cruel? A coward and a fool," Damon said flatly. "She has nowhere else to go, Ben. I offered her a place here, at least until she gets back on her feet." Ben studied him shrewdly. "You care about her already." "I can see it in your eyes." Damon did not deny it. "Is that so strange? She is brave and kind, and she has been through hell. Anyone would care." "Not the way you do," Ben said with a knowing smile. "But I think it is good. You have been alone too long, my friend. Maybe she is what you need." "Maybe," Damon admitted. "Or maybe I am what she needs right now. Either way, she is staying." The days that followed fell into a gentle rhythm. Zelda recovered her strength and insisted on helping around the ranch despite Damon's protests. She cooked meals that were far better than anything he and Ben had managed on their own, mended clothes, and began to bring a warmth to the cabin that had been missing. In the evenings, after the work was done, she and Damon would sit by the fire and talk for hours about everything and nothing. Damon found himself falling for her more each day. He loved the way she laughed, open and free, so different from the broken woman he had found in the snow. He loved her determination to rebuild her life, her refusal to let her father's cruelty define her. He loved the way she looked at him, as if he was something precious and rare. For her part, Zelda felt herself blooming under Damon's care. He treated her with a respect and kindness she had never known from a man. He asked her opinions, listened when she spoke, and made her feel valued. She caught herself watching him as he worked, admiring the strength in his shoulders, the gentleness in his hands when he tended the animals. At night she lay in his bed, surrounded by his scent, and wondered what it would be like to be held by him. 2 weeks after she arrived, Zelda was in the kitchen preparing dinner when Damon came in from the barn, his face tight with worry. "We need to talk," he said. Zelda's heart seized. Had he changed his mind? Did he want her to leave? "What is it?" "I was in town today getting supplies and I heard talk. Abel Wright is telling people that you ran away rather than marry him, that you are a thief who stole from your father before you left. He is offering a reward for information about your whereabouts." Zelda went pale. "He is lying." "I did not steal anything. I had nothing but the clothes on my back." "I know that," Damon said quickly. But Wright is powerful and people believe him. If word gets out that you are here, he might try to force you to go back. He could claim your father had authority over you, that you are his rightful wife since agreements were made. What do I do? Zelda asked, her voice shaking. Damon took her hands in his, and the touch sent warmth flooding through her despite her fear. You stay here. You do not go into town. And if anyone comes asking questions, we tell them the truth. You were injured and left to die, and I gave you shelter. No law in the land says you have to marry a man you do not want to marry. My father could come for me, Zelda whispered. Let him try, Damon said, his voice hard. He will have to go through me first, and I promise you, Zelda, I will not let anyone hurt you again. She looked up at him, at the fierce determination in his eyes, and felt her heart swell with emotion. Why are you doing this? You could get in trouble. Wright could make problems for you. Because I care about you, Damon said simply. More than I have cared about anyone since Emma died. These past 2 weeks, having you here, it has felt right in a way nothing has felt in years. I wake up happy knowing I will see your face. I go to sleep grateful you are safe under my roof. If that makes me a fool, so be it, but I am not going to abandon you to satisfy Abel Wright's greed or your father's cruelty. Tears spilled down Zelda's cheeks, but they were not tears of pain this time. I care about you too, she said. So much it scares me. I have never felt this way about anyone. Damon reached up and gently wiped her tears away with his thumb. Do not be scared. Whatever happens, we will face it together. He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, but she did not want to. She lifted her face to his, and their lips met in a kiss that was gentle and sweet and full of promise. It was a first kiss for both of them, tentative and exploring, and when they pulled apart they were both smiling. I have wanted to do that since the moment you woke up in that cabin, Damon admitted. I have wanted you to, Zelda said, and kissed him again. That night they sat closer by the fire, hands entwined, talking about the future. Damon told her about his dreams for the ranch, about wanting to expand the herd and maybe buy more land. Zelda shared her hope that she could perhaps teach reading to children in the area, giving back in some small way. You could do more than that, Damon said. You could be my wife if you wanted. I know it is soon, and I am not a rich man, but I can promise you that I will never hurt you, never abandon you, and I will spend every day trying to make you happy. Zelda felt her breath catch. Are you proposing to me? I suppose I am, Damon said with a shy smile. I know I should have flowers and a proper ring, but I do not want to wait. These past weeks have shown me what my life could be with you in it, and I do not want to go back to being alone. Marry me, Zelda. Let me spend my life proving to you what love is supposed to look like. Yes, Zelda said without hesitation. Yes, I will marry you. They married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the small church in Tucumcari, with Ben Torres standing as witness. The pastor, a kind man named Reverend Hammond, asked no questions when Damon explained that Zelda had no family present. He simply smiled and pronounced them husband and wife, and when Damon kissed his bride, it felt like a promise of new beginnings. But the happiness was short-lived. 3 days after the wedding, Abel Wright rode up to the ranch with 4 men, her father among them. Damon was in the barn when he heard the horses, and he came out to find Wright sitting astride a large black stallion, looking down at him with cold eyes. Larson, Wright said. I believe you have something that belongs to me. I have nothing of yours, Damon said evenly, though his hand moved instinctively to the gun at his hip. The girl, Zelda Jackson, her father tells me she is here. Damon saw Zelda's father, Marcus Jackson, sitting hunched on his horse, not meeting his eyes. Coward, Damon thought with contempt. Zelda is my wife now. We were married 3 days ago. Whatever agreement you had with her father is void. Wright's face darkened with anger. You had no right to interfere. Agreements were made, money was exchanged. Money for a human being, Damon said, his voice hard. That is called slavery, and last I checked, we fought a war over that. Zelda is a free woman and she chose to marry me. You have no claim on her. I will have the law on you, Wright snarled. You do that, Damon replied. But I think you will find that a marriage witnessed and recorded by a pastor carries more weight than a gambling debt. Now get off my land. For a tense moment, it seemed Wright might try to take Zelda by force, but then Ben emerged from the barn with a rifle in his hands, and Damon's hand rested meaningfully on his gun. Wright must have decided the fight was not worth it, because he turned his horse with a vicious jerk of the reins. This is not over, he said. Yes, it is, Damon replied. Leave us alone, Wright, or next time I will not be so polite. Wright rode away with his men, and Marcus Jackson went with them without a single word to his daughter, who had emerged from the cabin during the confrontation. Zelda stood on the porch, pale but determined, and watched her father leave for the second and final time. When they were gone, Damon went to her and pulled her into his arms. Are you all right? Yes, Zelda said, and realized it was true. He has no power over me anymore. I am free, truly free. We are free, Damon corrected and kissed her, true to his threat. Wright tried to make trouble. He went to the territorial marshal claiming Damon had stolen his property, but the marshal, a fair man named Tom Garrett, came to the ranch and listened to both sides of the story. When he heard about Marcus Jackson leaving his daughter to die in the snow and saw the still healing scar on Zelda's temple, his face grew hard. Mr. Wright, Marshal Garrett said, I do not care what agreements you made, Mrs. Larson is a married woman, and she has made it clear she entered into that marriage freely. You have no legal standing here. I suggest you accept that and move on. Wright stormed off, and that was the last they saw of him. Rumor later reached them that he had gone back east, his reputation in tatters after word spread of what he had tried to do. Marcus Jackson left the territory as well, hounded by the shame of nearly murdering his own daughter, and Zelda felt nothing when she heard the news except relief. Life settled into a happy rhythm after that. Zelda threw herself into making the ranch a true home, planting a garden in the spring, sewing curtains for the windows, and filling the cabin with warmth and laughter. Damon worked harder than ever, driven by dreams of giving his wife the life she deserved. The ranch prospered under their combined efforts, and they were able to hire 2 more hands and expand the herd. That first year of marriage was one of discovery and joy. They learned each other's rhythms, learned how to fight fair and make up sweetly, learned the language of love that was uniquely theirs. At night, Damon would hold Zelda close and marvel at how lucky he was to have found her. She would trace the line of his jaw with her fingers and tell him that he had saved her in every way a person could be saved. In the spring of 1882, Zelda discovered she was pregnant. She told Damon one evening after dinner, nervous about his reaction, but he swept her up in his arms and spun her around, laughing with pure joy. We are going to have a baby, he kept saying, as if he could not quite believe it. We are going to be parents. Are you happy? Zelda asked, though she could see the answer written all over his face. Happy does not even begin to describe it, Damon said. You have given me so much, Zelda. A home, a family, a reason to wake up smiling. This baby is just more proof of how blessed I am. Their son was born in December of 1882, a healthy boy with his mother's dark eyes and his father's strong chin. They named him Daniel, after Damon's father, and from the moment Damon held his son, he was lost. He was a devoted father, patient and gentle, and Zelda fell even more in love with him watching him care for their child. But parenthood was not easy, especially in the harsh reality of ranch life. Daniel was colicky and cried often, and there were nights when they both walked the floor with him, exhausted and worried. Money was tight with an extra mouth to feed, and they had to make hard choices about which repairs to make and which could wait. Through it all, they supported each other, working as a team, and their love deepened with every challenge they faced together. When Daniel was 2 years old, Zelda became pregnant again. This time she carried the baby with more confidence, knowing what to expect, and their daughter Emma was born in the summer of 1885, named for Damon's beloved sister. She was a tiny thing with blonde hair and her father's smile, and she completed their family in a way neither of them had known they needed. The years passed in a blur of hard work and happy moments. The children grew strong and healthy, running wild on the ranch under their father's watchful eye. Damon taught Daniel to ride when he was 5, and the boy took to it like he had been born in the saddle. Emma was quieter, preferring to help her mother in the garden or with the cooking, but she had a stubborn streak that reminded Damon of Zelda. In 1888, Damon was able to buy an additional 100 acres adjoining his property, expanding the ranch significantly. It was the fulfillment of a dream he had held since coming west, and he could not have done it without Zelda's careful management of their finances and her willingness to sacrifice luxuries so they could save. "We did this together," he told her the day the papers were signed, pulling her close. "Everything good in my life is because of you." "That is not true," Zelda said, but she was smiling. "You saved yourself, Damon. I just gave you a reason to keep going." "You gave me more than that," Damon said seriously. "You gave me love and family and hope. You made me believe in second chances." They stood together on their land, watching their children play in the distance, and felt the weight of how far they had come. From a frozen mountain trail where Zelda had nearly died to this moment of peace and prosperity, they had traveled an impossible distance. Their love had been forged in hardship and tempered by challenge, and it was stronger for it. In the evenings, when the children were in bed and the work was done, Damon and Zelda still sat by the fire as they had in those early days. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they simply sat in comfortable silence, but always they were connected, hands entwined or shoulders touching. These were Zelda's favorite moments, when the world was quiet and it was just the two of them, the way it had been in that lined shack so long ago. "Do you ever think about that night?" Damon asked one evening, as if reading her thoughts. "When I found you in the snow, sometimes," Zelda admitted. "It feels like a lifetime ago and also like yesterday. I was so broken then, so lost. I truly thought I was going to die." "I think part of you did die that night," Damon said thoughtfully. "The part that believed you were not worthy of love or happiness. You had to let that part go so the real you could emerge." "Maybe," Zelda said. "Or maybe I just needed someone to show me what I could be. You saw something in me that I could not see in myself. I saw a woman who refused to give up her freedom, even when it cost her everything," Damon said. "I saw courage and strength. I fell in love with you the moment you opened your eyes, you know. I did not understand it then, but I knew you were going to change my life." "We changed each other," Zelda said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "You showed me what a real man looks like, what a real father should be. You taught me that love is not about control or ownership. It is about partnership and respect. Our children will grow up knowing what that looks like, and they will never settle for less." "I hope so," Damon said. "I hope we are giving them a better start than either of us had." They were. Daniel and Emma grew up secure in their parents' love, never doubting for a moment that they were wanted and valued. Daniel developed his father's work ethic and his mother's compassionate heart, while Emma inherited her mother's strength and her father's gentle nature. They were good children who would grow into good adults, and that was perhaps Damon and Zelda's greatest achievement. As the years passed, the ranch continued to prosper. Damon became known in the territory as a fair employer and an honest rancher, and other cattlemen sought his advice and partnership. Zelda became a pillar of the small community that grew up around Tucumcari, organizing charity drives and teaching Sunday school at the church where she and Damon had married. Together they built not just a ranch but a legacy. In 1895, when Daniel was 13 and Emma was 10, Zelda discovered she was pregnant again. It was unexpected, and she was older now, but the doctor assured her she was healthy and the pregnancy was progressing well. Damon was overjoyed at the prospect of another child, though he hovered over Zelda more than she appreciated. "I am not made of glass," she told him one afternoon when he tried to stop her from lifting a basket of laundry. "I have done this twice before, remember?" "I know," Damon said sheepishly. "But you are also 45 years old and I worry." "Well, stop worrying and trust me to know my own body," Zelda said, but she softened the words with a kiss. Their third child, a son they named Joseph, was born in March of 1896, and he was perfect. Daniel and Emma doted on their baby brother, and the house was filled with even more laughter and chaos. Damon, now approaching 50, found that fatherhood suited him just as well in middle age as it had in his youth. One evening, when Joseph was 6 months old and sleeping peacefully in his cradle, Damon and Zelda sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the New Mexico sky in shades of gold and crimson. It was moments like these that Damon treasured most, when he could simply be with his wife, no words necessary. "I have been thinking," Zelda said after a while, "about that night in the line shack. You asked me why you were being so kind, and I asked you the same thing. Do you remember what you said?" "I said several things," Damon replied with a smile. "Which one are you thinking of? You said from the moment you saw me, you knew you were meant to find me, that I was meant to come into your life." "I remember, and I was right, was I not?" "You were," Zelda agreed. "But I think it was more than that. I think we were both broken in our own ways, both alone and grieving, and we needed each other to become whole. You needed to save someone after you could not save Emma. I needed to be saved after my father threw me away. We healed each other." Damon was quiet for a moment, considering her words. "Maybe you are right. I know that loving you has made me a better man than I would have been otherwise. You gave me purpose beyond just survival. And you gave me worth," Zelda said. "You made me believe I was someone worth saving, worth loving, worth building a life with. My father tried to destroy me, but he failed. Because of you, I am stronger than I ever would have been if he had not hurt me." It was a profound realization that the worst moment of her life had led to all the best moments. If Marcus Jackson had not left her in the snow, she would never have met Damon. She would have married Abel Wright and lived a life of quiet misery, or she would have stayed on her father's failing ranch, unloved and unvalued. Instead, she had a husband who cherished her, children who adored her, and a life rich with meaning and joy. "I am grateful for every day I have with you," Damon said, reaching over to take her hand. "Even the hard days, the days when the cattle get sick or the crops fail or the children are difficult. Because at the end of every day, I get to fall asleep next to you, and that makes everything worthwhile." "I love you," Zelda said simply, "more than I ever thought it was possible to love someone." "I love you too," Damon replied, "to the end of my days and beyond." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, two souls who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful together. Inside the house, their children slept safely, the future they would inherit secure. It was everything they had worked for, everything they had dreamed of, and it was real. The years continued to pass in their gentle rhythm. Daniel grew into a fine young man and fell in love with a rancher's daughter from a neighboring property. They married when he was 20, and Damon and Zelda welcomed their daughter-in-law Grace into the family with open arms. Emma showed no interest in marrying young, preferring instead to study and eventually becoming a teacher in Tucumcari, fulfilling the dream her mother had once had for herself. Joseph grew up adored by his older siblings, and by all accounts he was the happiest child any of them had ever known. Damon and Zelda grew older together, their hair turning gray, their hands becoming weathered by work, but their love never dimmed. They still sat by the fire in the evenings, still held hands when they walked, still looked at each other with the same wonder they had felt in that lined shack so many years ago. When they had been married 25 years, their children organized a celebration at the ranch. Friends and neighbors came from miles around to honor the couple who had become beloved fixtures in the community. There were toasts and laughter and stories shared, and through it all Damon and Zelda sat side by side, overwhelmed by the outpouring of love. "I never imagined this," Zelda said to Damon late that night when everyone had gone home and it was just the two of them again. "When I was lying in that snow, freezing and alone, I could never have imagined that my life would become this. That I would have a husband who loves me, children who make me proud, friends who value me. It feels like a dream." "It is not a dream," Damon said, pulling her close. "It is the life we built together through hard work and determination and love. We earned this, Zelda. Every bit of happiness we have, we earned." "Then I am glad we earned it together," Zelda said and kissed him. They had many more years together after that celebration. Years filled with the joy of watching their grandchildren grow. Years of continued work on the ranch that was their shared pride. Years of simply being together in the way that only people who have loved deeply and long can be. They argued sometimes because no marriage is perfect, but they always made up, always remembered that they were on the same side, always chose each other. When Damon was 72 and Zelda was 70, they sat on their porch on a warm summer evening, holding hands as they had done countless times before. The ranch was thriving under Daniel's management now, their children all settled and happy, their grandchildren a source of endless delight. "I have been thinking," Damon said, "about everything that had to happen for us to find each other. If I had not been hunting elk that day, if the storm had not forced me onto that particular trail, if your father had chosen a different place to leave you. Any one of those things could have been different and we would never have met. But they were not different," Zelda said. "We were meant to find each other, just as you said that very first night. Some things are simply meant to be." "I suppose you are right," Damon said. "I am just grateful that out of all the paths my life could have taken, it took the one that led to you. And I am grateful that the worst day of my life became the first day of my real life," Zelda said. "Because that is what you gave me, Damon. A real life, filled with real love. My father tried to break me, but he set me free instead. Free to find you, free to become who I was always meant to be." They sat together as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant colors, two people who had beaten impossible odds and created something lasting and true. Their love story had begun with cruelty and cold, with betrayal and pain, but it had become something beautiful, something that would outlast them both in the children and grandchildren who carried forward their values and their commitment to each other. When Zelda finally passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 78, surrounded by her family, Damon held her hand and whispered all the things he had told her 1,000 times before. That she was the love of his life, that she had made him whole, that he would carry her in his heart until they met again. And when he himself passed 2 years later, his last words were her name, spoken with love and longing. Their children buried them side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, under two cottonwood trees that had grown tall and strong over the years. The headstones were simple, marking the dates of their births and deaths, but underneath was carved a single line that told their whole story. Two souls, one heart, forever together. And on summer evenings, when the wind whispered through the cottonwoods, it was said you could almost hear them still, Damon and Zelda, laughing together and telling the story of how a cowboy found a dying woman in the snow and stayed until she woke, and how that moment of kindness had bloomed into a love that lasted a lifetime and beyond. Their legacy lived on in the children they raised, in the ranch they built, in the community they served, and in the countless lives they touched with their example of what real love looks like. It was not always easy, not always smooth, but it was always true, always faithful, always worth fighting for. And so the story that began with heartbreak and betrayal, with cold and pain and near death, ended with warmth and love and a life well lived. Zelda had been hurt by her father and left in the cold, but a cowboy had found her and stayed until she woke, and in doing so he had given her everything. And she, in turn, had given him the same. They had saved each other, healed each other, and loved each other with a devotion that became legendary in the territory. It was, in the end, exactly the kind of love story the Wild West was made for, raw and real, forged in hardship and proven through time. A testament to the fact that sometimes the worst moments of our lives can lead us to the best, and that love, when it is true, can overcome anything, even betrayal, even death, even the coldest winter night when all hope seems lost, because Damon had not let Zelda die that night in the snow. He had stayed, and in staying, he had given both of them a future neither could have imagined. A future filled with joy and purpose and the kind of love that makes every hardship worthwhile. A future that proved, beyond any doubt, that some people are simply meant to find each other, no matter what obstacles stand in their way, and they had. Against all odds, through pain and fear and uncertainty, they had found each other, and once they had, they never let go.